Welcome to the S.O.A.P Bible Study Series from Oak Tree Community Church in South Bend, Indiana. We are working our way through the book of 1 Kings, and this is our third week, and we are
into it,
in King Solomon's reign now.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah, and in fact, we're at the part where his dad David gave him the plans, and he is executing these plans.
Yeah.
So he's getting
literally and figuratively executing people, and he's executing.
I wasn't going to go there, but it did fit in very well. So this, last week was all about getting the supplies to build the temple and the palace, and then actually physically building it. So now it's built, but they haven't dedicated it yet, and they're not like in the house, right? It's just
not
built,
fully
it's
operational,
not finished.
Right?
Yeah. So we'll see that, and this week we see specifically the ark being moved, right? The representation of this is where God lives, which is the whole purpose of the temple in the first place.
Yep.
All right. So now that the temple's been built, it's time for God to move in. And step one is to move the ark.
Yeah.
Now, if we remember back to David's, there was a little problem when they moved the ark.
A couple of times, I think.
Yeah, and the problem was they started to move the ark. There was a problem, and somebody reached out to stabilize the ark. And you don't touch God's ark.
Because it was on an ox cart. The Philistines had done that, and they did this ox cart a couple of times. The Levites were supposed to be carrying, the priests actually, were supposed to be carrying it. And, when you do it the wrong way, bad things are going to happen.
Yeah. So David stopped work and went back and reviewed notes to see who should be moving the ark, and then made a big deal about moving it from where it was into Jerusalem.
Yeah.
But now we need to move it just a little ways, right?
Yeah, it's in Jerusalem. Now it needs to go into the most holy
temple.
place,
Right.
Into the temple. Yeah. Because the ark, if you remember all the way back to Exodus, the ark was the place of God's presence. Right? That's where the high priest would put the blood on the Day of Atonement, and it was a big deal. And so having this temple, having for God's presence to be there with Solomon in Jerusalem, it is not just a token thing. This is a big deal.
Yeah, real big deal. So King Solomon seems to really mimic what his dad did, what David did. So David led the whole procession. So now King Solomon is leading the whole procession.
Yep.
Only the Levites and the priests, which is to me, it was kind of a weird way they said that, carried the ark. So
because the priests are a subset of the tribe of Levi. So
right.
Anybody who's in the tribe of Levi is a Levite, but not every Levite was a priest. Every priest was a Levite, but not the other way around.
Right. So were they just saying only the priests who were Levites were carrying the ark?
Well,
to me, the wording, and maybe it was just the net version, was a little odd.
Well, to say the Levites and the priests, it means that not just the priests were involved, but the entire tribe, the entire clan of Levites. Because the priests had specific jobs, but the other Levites had jobs too. And if you go all the way back to the beginning of Numbers, chapters 3 and 4, you find here are the jobs of the non-priest Levites.
Which would have been what? Bringing or taking down the tabernacle and carrying it.
Yep, carrying
all
other things.
The lampstands everybody had.
The altar of incense, all of the different stuff that didn't include the ark, all the vessels, the utensils, all the stuff that went into the tabernacle now being moved to the temple. They had, God had laid out,
list.
Your family does this, your family carries this, exactly the way God wanted it done. And I assume that Solomon actually followed that as they brought it in.
Yeah, it seems like it. Solomon makes a speech to the whole nation. He recaps his father's work. He stresses that the temple is to honor the Lord God of Israel. Then he gives a prayer.
Yeah.
And this is quite a lengthy prayer. It's
almost
almost 40 verses. Commentaries that I read said it's the longest prayer in the Bible.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And what's important about this prayer is most people they're going to read over it or skip over or whatever. But what a lot of people, especially
He never gives you credit that you're actually going to read.
You will read, but not everybody, right? I'm talking about the United States in general. In people, Christians in the United States, especially some Western countries, but especially the United States, make a big deal about a verse in 2 Chronicles. 2 Chronicles 7:14. If my people who are called by my name will humble themselves and seek my face and turn from their wicked ways, then I will. Basically, it sums up with heal their
things,
land,
yeah.
right? I will. Take the diseases and the plagues and everything. But that is the parallel passage to this. That was God's response to Solomon. When Solomon says, God, you said if we obey you, you will bless us in these ways. If we disobey you, you will curse us in these ways. All the way back to Deuteronomy.
Right.
So please help us obey you. And God says, here's what's going to happen. You're not going to obey me, and I'm going to do all these things. But if my people who are called by my name, that's not the United States of America, that's Israel, will humble themselves and repent of their sins, and I will heal their land from what? Not from sin, but from the plagues that I'm going to put on their land. From the famine I'm going to put, from the drought I'm going to put on their land, and I will heal them spiritually as well. So that verse that you probably know really well in 2 Chronicles, this is the parallel passage. This is the context. Even though we're not in 2 Chronicles, in 1 Kings, this is the context of that very well-known.
Yeah, and in this, there's 4 sections that say the time will come when.
Yep.
And then, oddly enough, they're focusing on the sin side.
Yeah.
So, usually you would expect this to be upbeat. Oh, we will never sin again, blah, blah, blah. But Solomon is saying, when we do sin again, help us to remember that our nation was defeated in battle because we sinned.
Yep. Bring us back.
We
don't
have a
let
drought
us
because
go.
of our sin.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. We've talked multiple times about Solomon's wisdom, and he prayed for judicial wisdom, not, just like to be the wisest person ever, even though he was, right? But this shows a lot of wisdom. We're not perfect. We know we're going to go off. Don't let us go. Don't just be done with us. Remember your promises to us. Help us come back. And then that's what God's response is. If you come back, I will heal your land. I will remove these things that I've placed on you.
So when David was moving the ark, the priests would take one step, and then they would sacrifice an animal.
Yeah, I don't think it was like 6 steps or something.
Okay,
but
was
still,
it? Oh, okay.
It was.
Okay.
I don't think it was every one, but I think it was. Yeah, it was.
Okay.
It was really short. I mean, it's not a lot, right?
Well, I think as part of that, and as part of dedicating the temple, there were 22,000 cattle and 120,000 sheep sacrificed.
I know. That's a lot of animals.
That is. And it also said it was too many for the altar there at the temple. So there was burnt sacrifices. There were grain sacrifices.
Yep.
And then Solomon and the nation of Israel, they celebrated for 2 weeks.
2 weeks.
At a festival.
Yeah. Because this was, like I said, this is not just a token thing. This was a big deal because finally, Jerusalem has been David's capital for 33 years. And God's presence has not been there.
Right.
So this is huge,
So chapter 9, it says God appeared to Solomon a second time. And we seem to be like 20 years later. Is that about right? Okay.
After the construction of, it says after he finished the temple, the royal palace, and all the other construction projects he had planned. Well, we know the temple and the palace were 20 years together. So depending on
how much more.
So more, if there was any overlap, whatever. So at least 20 years, yeah.
So God followed through with his promises, and he told Solomon, hey, you need to follow through with yours too. And you and your offspring need to remain faithful to God. Don't follow any idols. Don't serve any other gods. Otherwise, I'm leaving the temple.
Yeah.
And the temple would be knocked down.
Yeah.
Little hint for
Which is exactly what happened 300 years later with Nebuchadnezzar, Daniel, Ezekiel, Jeremiah, that whole thing.
Yeah, but then God says, okay, and when that does happen, people are going to ask, how could you let this happen? And the answer would be, they embraced other gods.
Yep.
which is wild to me.
Which is and the rest of First Kings and Second Kings, that is exactly what happened. I mean, Solomon just prayed, don't leave us, and God said, listen, I'm not going to leave you, but I will leave the temple, and you will be scattered. Deuteronomy 30, I'm going to scatter you across the nations. I mean, none of this is news. God has been warning, literally at this point, God has warned them, Israel, about this for 500 years.
Right.
And Solomon still went off in the wrong direction, and all the kings and.
Yeah. So it actually started right around this time from Solomon's going downhill point of view. So Solomon goes on this building spree, and we think he's spending money that David has accumulated, that he's accumulated. Turns out that's not 100% right.
Not 100%.
Yeah.
No.
So Hiram. Mm-hmm. And this is the guy who had the cedars, right?
Yeah,
Tyre,
up in modern day Lebanon, Cedars of Lebanon. Yep.
So it seems like he was footing the bill.
Yeah, Solomon had a pretty large credit card.
Yeah, so that's exactly what I was thinking, right? That Solomon was putting everything on a credit card, and now the bill comes. And he's like, So Solomon repays this guy with 20 cities, which is kind of cool.
Yeah, except he's already a king of his own little area. And
Right. Well, there's a couple of other big problems. One is it's not his land to give away. It's God's land.
It's God's land. Israel is God's land.
Right. And the second, Hiram says, these cities are completely worthless to me.
What am I going to do with these cities? Right.
Yeah.
And this is especially, I would almost take this as an insult too, because we're about to read just how much cash that Solomon was rolling in. And he's like, here, have some cities.
Yeah. So I guess I either missed it or didn't say, did he then send him over a check for the amount? It doesn't really say how he paid him back or what he did, but at the end of the chapter, we do get, like you said, an idea of how much Solomon did. And there was some huge building projects, right?
Yeah.
He fortified Jerusalem. He rebuilt cities. He rebuilt palaces and other buildings.
And ships, this took an entire fleet, a navy, and everything. Yeah.
This took some money.
Yeah. Yep. Sure did.
All right. So our last chapter, chapter 10, is the Queen of Sheba comes in and visits Solomon, and we got to go with your story here. So as we're kind of reviewing beforehand, he of course brings up Aladdin,
right?
The Disney movie Aladdin. Go ahead.
Well, I'm just reading through here, and it says she's come with pomp and circumstance, and her camels and spices and gold and gems and all this stuff, and I just think make way for Prince Ali Ababwa, right? And you got all these 86 camels, and it's actually going to not talk about peacocks from her, but it's going to talk about peacocks later on in the chapter. I'm like, this is like Aladdin. This is like, and just like in the movie, and of course, obviously it's a cartoon, it's fiction, but just like in the movie, the whole city is just like, oh, what's going on here?
Right.
You can imagine.
Think about this. Okay, so this is a queen who comes from 1,400 miles away.
Yeah.
She has to be bringing an incredible entourage, especially when you hear how much money she brings. She has to have enough guards to protect this.
Yeah.
And then you have to have enough food and people, and this cost a pretty penny.
So it says that she ended up giving, she brought 120 talents of gold with her and giving it to Solomon.
Good for him.
Okay, what's 120 bucks or whatever. Well, so here's the thing. A talent, if you look at most commentaries, average it out to about 75 pounds per talent, times 120. Yep. Now, let's put that into
times 16.
16 for ounces and how much gold is right now per ounce. Just as of today, I just checked the numbers today before this recording. So if you're watching the recording at a different time, it's a little bit different. But as of today, that 120 talents is like $350 million US today.
Right. So then the big question is, why would a queen from 1,400 miles away travel all the way to give that king $350 million?
Because I don't think that I think she had it with her, And she had all this stuff. She had all this stuff, and she was going to test him. I've heard all these legends. I've heard all these myths.
Yep.
The myth, the man, the legend. Solomon. Let's see if he really is what everybody says he is.
Yeah.
Turns out he's actually more.
He's more. Yeah, the queen said he passed every question.
Yep.
She asked
She
him.
brought hard
and his
questions
wealth,
with
his
her.
wealth surpassed what she thought.
Yeah, I mean, when she walked in, maybe it wasn't quite nearly as amazing for the people in the city as in Aladdin, because the people in the city were so used to the wealth.
Yeah.
Later on in the chapter, it says that that the gold was so plentiful in Jerusalem, and I would guess in Israel at large, but especially in Jerusalem, gold was so plentiful that silver was considered worthless. It's like, it's just, you're going to pay me in silver?
That goes back to bronze too.
Yeah.
We didn't even
count the bronze, because bronze, it's like we're paving the street with bronze, and silver, we're, that's not worth picking up a silver coin on the ground.
Yeah. And then as we get to the end of the chapter, he brings up that Solomon also had merchant ships.
Yeah.
So he had a navy, but this navy also went around discovering things, and would bring back plants and bring back animals. Talk about bringing back peacocks. Well, apes was the one for me, bringing back. So you have to capture an ape, keep it alive, figure out what it eats, and transport it back.
So, like, the Jerusalem Zoo was a thing back then, right? And there's actually proof there are in mountains, like in South America, where it's sort of hard to get to today. There's like Proto-Hebrew, like pre-biblical Hebrew or ancient Hebrew.
Like Hebrew of this time?
Yeah, inscribed in caves on walls. Like Solomon's navy may have been the first navy to cover the whole globe after the flood.
Wow.
They may have been on every continent.
Wow.
Cool. It really is amazing. We learned that he had copper mines. It was so much gold. It says people are 666 talents of gold. 666 wasn't a thing in 2nd Samuel. You don't get, or First Kings. Okay. You don't get that until Revelation, right? Well, with the same math, every year he received, besides what he collected in taxes from merchants and everything,
which was huge,
just his planned wealth. That's $2 billion a year just in gold.
Right.
And where Israel is between Europe and Africa and Asia, everybody basically had to go through here. He had toll roads. He had tax collectors. He said, if you're going to do business, you're going to import this through my country.
Yeah.
I'm going to take a piece of that.
Take a taste. Yep. Yeah. Amazing. The wealth of it is really amazing. And like we said, this is really the time when Israel is elevated. They now have a king, which wasn't in the plan, but is there. But they went through over a generation of work to be able to get God to be in a temple.
Yep.
And now they have the wealth, they have the land, they have peace, they have everything.
Yep.
What could possibly go wrong?
There's a tiny breadcrumb of a hint down in verse 28 of chapter 10. Solomon acquired his horses from Egypt.
Doesn't sound like much.
No, but back in Deuteronomy 17, God said, when you have a king, because I know you're going to ask for a king, when you have a king, this is what he's going to do. But here are my requirements. He must not get horses he must not go back to Egypt to buy horses and chariots.
This is the start?
We haven't seen him doing a ton of bad stuff yet. Of course, we know, if you know Solomon's story, you know how the next chapter is going to go. But right here, he's doing all this stuff. Everything seems to be going so well. And the wisest person in the world, who doesn't make mistakes,
chooses to
do
go against God.
Exactly what God said not to do. we've got a problem.
Yeah.
So sorry to ruin what otherwise is an amazing chapter, and we already saw in chapter 4, all of the books that he wrote. Just
Right.
I cannot imagine. Can you imagine the living in Israel at
Right.
this
How
time?
cool it was.
Yeah,
To just all the gold, silver's not even.
yeah. Everything in the palace, everything in the temple was. I mean, the place had to have been hard to look at. You had to put your sunglasses on because everything was plated in gold. We're talking 24 karat plating on everything.
Right.
And that wasn't enough, so he made more gold stuff and stuck it to the wall. But money's not everything.
Yeah.
Wisdom isn't everything. You still got to have a heart that's right toward God and with God, and we start to see him slipping here.
Right.
So,
Right. But that's next week.
but that's next week. Yeah, and we'll see that in some of the fallout. But for this week, enjoy the $2 billion of gold and the ivory and the apes and the peacocks and all the other things that go along with this really golden age in Israel's history. Literally golden age in Israel's history. If there are things that we didn't mention that you want to point out, we'd love to hear those. Of course, we'd love to take your questions that you have as well. And we will see you back here next time and pick up in chapter 11.